It was a quiet night in Linda Curry's home. At 49 years old, Linda was still known for her kindness, her big smile, and the way she always welcomed people in. Friends saw her as warm and generous, a woman who had been through heartbreak but never gave up on finding love. But in the early hours of that night, something suddenly changed. Linda began to feel weak. Her body hurt, her breathing grew heavy, and soon she was rushed to the hospital. Nurses noticed something unusual. Her IV bag didn't look right. The liquid inside was cloudy, and it shouldn't have been. No one could understand what was happening. Was it a mistake or something more? What followed would reveal dark secrets, betrayals, and a shocking truth that no one in her quiet neighborhood ever expected. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Linda Curry, known to some by her maiden name, Linda Kincaid, was born in 1944. She grew up in a warm household where love was plentiful, but her closest and most enduring bond was with her sister. Together, they shared secrets, laughter, and a sense of trust that would carry Linda through life's challenges. To her friends, Linda was radiant, ambitious, and full of kindness. She had a wide circle of people who admired her for her generosity and her warm, welcoming nature. Yet behind that brightness, Linda carried private heartache. She had endured the collapse of 2 marriages, each ending in disappointment, and she never had children, something she quietly longed for. Still, she pressed forward, determined to find happiness and build a fulfilling life. By 1981, Linda met Bill Sandretto, a life insurance salesman. Their relationship stretched across several years, but it was far from easy. Financial disputes became a constant shadow. Linda's tendency to spend freely clashed with Bill's careful, frugal ways. The tension grew until, in 1989, they parted ways. But their connection was not entirely broken. Remarkably, Linda and Bill remained friends, a rare and genuine bond that spoke to Linda's forgiving heart. That same year, Linda decided she needed a fresh start. At 45 years old, she took a bold step and bought herself a spacious 2-story home in San Clemente, California, complete with a bright, welcoming garden. Friends often came to visit, gathering in her new house where she hosted dinners and filled the rooms with warmth. After years of personal challenges, Linda still believed love was out there for her. It wasn't long before someone new appeared in her life. In 1989, a 32-year-old nuclear engineer named Paul Curry began working at Southern California Edison, the very company where Linda had built her career, climbing from secretary to manager at the San Onofre nuclear generating station. Paul stood out immediately. He was intelligent, articulate, and never missed an opportunity to remind others that he was a member of Mensa. He was proud of his intellect, eager to showcase it whenever he could. That same year, Paul even made a television appearance on Jeopardy, winning 2 nights in a row and pocketing more than $24,000 in prize money. Linda couldn't help but be intrigued. Despite the age difference, she was over a decade older, and despite his reputation for arrogance, she saw qualities in him that she admired. His confidence struck her as strength rather than conceit. Their professional conversation soon grew into personal ones, and over time, friendship blossomed into romance. Paul eventually moved into Linda's San Clemente home, becoming part of her daily life. On September 12, 1992, the couple traveled to Las Vegas. In a small wedding ceremony, they became husband and wife. Linda glowed with happiness, convinced she had finally found the partner she had been searching for. To her, Paul represented stability, intelligence, and the promise of a secure future together. But those closest to her weren't convinced. Her best friend Mary, who had stood by her side for years, sensed something was off. Even Bill Sandretto, her former partner who still cared for her deeply, worried about the match. To them, Paul seemed distant, self-absorbed, and more concerned with his own image than with Linda's happiness. He appeared to enjoy boasting about his accomplishments far more than showing affection to his new wife. After the wedding, life in San Clemente seemed promising on the surface. Linda Curry and Paul Curry had a combined income of nearly $140,000 a year, a considerable sum for the early 1990s. They lived in Linda's spacious 2-story home with its welcoming garden, and friends assumed they would be comfortable, maybe even prosperous. But soon, cracks began to show. Despite their good salaries, money troubles loomed. Bills piled up, credit card debt grew, and Linda, who had always been generous with her spending, was suddenly struggling in a way she hadn't before. The puzzle began to make sense when Linda uncovered some of Paul's secrets. He hadn't been entirely honest with her. Paul had already been married twice before and was financially responsible for 3 children from those marriages. These obligations, which he had kept hidden until after their vows, drained a large portion of his income. For Linda, the revelation was painful. She had believed Paul was her fresh start, her chance at lasting love, yet she was not ready to let go. Determined to save her marriage, she forgave him and carried on. She continued to open her home to friends, hosting dinners and gatherings, speaking warmly of Paul in hopes that others would see what she thought she saw: his intelligence, his stability, his potential as a partner. But those closest to her were unconvinced. Their concerns only deepened when Linda revealed something unsettling. Paul had begun pressuring her to take out a new life insurance policy, this one worth an astonishing $1 million. It wasn't as though Linda was uninsured. By then, she already held several policies totaling nearly $1 million, with Paul himself listed as the primary beneficiary on 400,000 of them. To her, Paul's request initially seemed reasonable, perhaps even a sign of wanting to secure their future. But Mary immediately saw danger. She reminded Linda of the secrets Paul had kept: his past marriages, his financial obligations, his hidden debts, and urged her not to agree. Reluctantly, Linda listened to her friend. She chose not to sign the new policy. But even after that decision, the tension never left. By mid-1993, just 6 months into the marriage, the doubts among her friends were stronger than ever. Paul continued to behave in ways that seemed cold and calculating. He spoke often of money, rarely of love, and seemed detached from the woman who so openly adored him. Unsure of what to believe, Linda turned to another trusted confidant, Frankie, a close friend and colleague from the power plant. She invited Frankie to stay at her San Clemente home, hoping that an outside perspective might offer clarity. During her visit, Frankie watched closely. To her surprise, Paul appeared thoughtful and caring. He prepared bubble baths for Linda every evening, brought her freshly made salads, and cooked small dinners with unexpected gentleness. To Frankie, it looked like the behavior of a man who loved his wife. She left reassured, believing that perhaps Linda's fears and her friend's suspicions were unfounded. But Mary and others were not convinced. They had seen too many troubling signs, too many contradictions in Paul's behavior, and as the years went on, their unease would prove to be tragically justified. By the middle of 1993, Linda's life seemed outwardly stable, but beneath the surface, something had begun to shift. In July of that year, friends noticed changes in her appearance and energy. Linda, who had always taken pride in her health and vitality, suddenly seemed frail. She complained of persistent stomach pains that refused to fade, waves of exhaustion that left her unable to keep up with her usual routines, and a rapid, unexplained loss of weight. For those who knew her as lively and full of energy, the decline was alarming. She sought medical help and doctors began running tests, searching for answers. Yet nothing conclusive appeared. Weeks dragged on, her condition worsened, and eventually she was admitted to the hospital for closer observation. To outsiders, her husband Paul Curry appeared deeply devoted. He was often by her side, attentive and caring, rarely leaving her hospital room. Friends saw him holding her hand, speaking softly, projecting the image of a worried spouse. But Linda herself began to notice something disturbing. One day, as she glanced at the IV bag attached to her arm, she saw that the liquid inside looked cloudy, its color strangely off. Uneasy, she alerted the nurses. Hospital staff quickly investigated, drawing samples from the bag for testing. What they found was shocking. The IV fluid was contaminated with lidocaine, a drug used as a numbing agent in medical procedures, but one that can be lethal if introduced directly into the bloodstream. There was absolutely no medical reason for lidocaine to be in her IV. An internal review began immediately. Could it have been a tragic mistake, or had someone tampered with her treatment deliberately? Suspicion soon fell on Paul. He had spent long hours alone in Linda's room, often when she was sedated or asleep. The timeline pointed squarely at him as the only person who could have slipped the substance into the IV without being noticed. Linda's closest friends were horrified. For them, this was the confirmation of what they had long feared, that Paul was not the loving husband he pretended to be. They believed he had both the motive and the opportunity, especially with the life insurance policies in his name. Yet when confronted with the possibility, Linda could not bring herself to accept it. She admitted with heartbreaking honesty that if anyone had a reason to harm her, it would be Paul, but she refused to believe he was capable of such a thing. To her, it was easier to accept that the hospital staff had made an error than to face the idea that the man she loved could be trying to kill her. At her request, the case was quietly closed. After 21 days in the hospital, Linda's health seemed to improve. She was discharged and returned home, determined to put the ordeal behind her. She tried to rebuild her strength, to focus on her marriage, and to reclaim the normal life she had always wanted. For a brief time, it appeared as though she might succeed. But only a few months later, in December 1993, the nightmare returned. The same symptoms came back with a vengeance: piercing abdominal pain, overwhelming fatigue, and drastic weight loss. Once again, Linda was admitted to the hospital, and once again, doctors noticed something strange. Her IV fluids looked unusual, clouded, and suspicious. Laboratory tests confirmed the worst. Lidocaine had been found in her system again. This time, the hospital acted swiftly. A bold decision was made. No one would be allowed inside Linda's room without a nurse present. A sign was taped to her door, a visible shield meant to protect her. The unspoken message was clear. The restriction wasn't for every visitor. It was directed at one man in particular, Paul Curry. Despite the suspicions swirling around him, Paul Curry wasn't ready to give up. He tried to outsmart everyone by arranging for Linda to be transferred to a different hospital department, somewhere the staff wouldn't know about the earlier incidents with the contaminated IV bags. But the plan didn't work. It didn't take long for authorities to realize the same pattern was happening again. Once more, Paul denied any involvement. He remained calm, even as police questioned him. And once more, Linda defended her husband, refusing to believe that the man she had married could be capable of harming her. Against her friend's pleas, she insisted it was all a mistake. Her health improved during her stay, and before long she was preparing to return home. But just before her release, something strange happened. Linda asked her best friend, Mary, to stop by the house and bring her a few personal belongings to the hospital. When Mary walked into Linda's living room, she froze. Scattered across the coffee table were stacks of papers, life insurance policies. To Mary's shock, many of them listed Paul Curry as the beneficiary. She immediately told Linda what she had seen, assuming her friend had simply forgotten them there. But Linda's response was unsettling. She explained that when she left the house, the papers hadn't been out. That meant Paul had been going through them, calculating, perhaps, how much money he would stand to inherit if Linda were gone. To Mary, the picture was becoming clear. Paul wasn't the devoted husband he pretended to be. He was a man with a motive. Yet Linda, desperate not to admit another failed relationship, refused to accept it. She clung to the belief that Paul loved her, ignoring her friend's desperate pleas to leave him. As Linda's health improved, she was discharged once again and returned home to the very man so many suspected. The friendship between Linda and Mary began to fade after that. Their once frequent calls and visits grew fewer, and a silence settled between them. Then, on June 9, 1994, Mary received something she never expected: an email from Paul. It was the first time he had ever reached out to her directly. His words were chilling. He told her that Linda was gravely ill and might not survive. Hours later, just after midnight, Paul dialed 911, reporting that his wife was unresponsive. By the time paramedics arrived at the Curry home in San Clemente, it was already too late. Linda Curry was dead. The news devastated those who loved her. For Mary and the rest of Linda's friends, the tragedy confirmed what they had feared all along, that Paul was behind her death. Toxicology results soon revealed the horrifying truth. Linda's body contained lethal levels of nicotine, a substance she despised and would never have willingly consumed. Along with it, doctors found a significant amount of a sleep aid in her system. This combination left little doubt. Someone had poisoned her, and that someone had access, motive, and everything to gain. After Linda's death, Paul Curry wasted no time collecting the money. From her life insurance and retirement plan, he claimed a total of $419,000. But he didn't walk away with everything. Because Linda had named her sister in her will, part of the estate went to her as well. That decision spoke volumes about their relationship. Linda had no children of her own, but she wanted to make sure her sister would always be provided for. Then came another shocking revelation. The truth about Paul's carefully constructed image began to unravel. investigators learned that he had lied about much of his life. Despite what he had told Linda, Paul Curry was not an engineer. He had never even finished his degree. His boasts about being a Mensa member? Fabricated. His employers at Southern California Edison eventually uncovered the deception. But instead of exposing him, they quietly allowed him to resign, ensuring that no trace of his lies appeared on his record. With his past catching up to him, Paul sold Linda's beautiful San Clemente home and moved halfway across the country to Salina, Kansas. There, he reinvented himself once again, securing a job as a city building inspector and even remarrying a woman named Teresa. To the outside world, it looked as if he had successfully moved on with his life. But the shadow of Linda's death never disappeared. Behind the scenes, the investigation remained alive. Though no physical evidence directly tied Paul to the poisoning, one determined investigator refused to let the case fade away. Her name was Yvonne Schul, and she believed the answer lay in logic and persistence. For Schul, the facts were simple. Linda's body contained a lethal amount of nicotine. She had also been given a powerful sleep aid. That combination meant she could not have administered the deadly dose herself. On the night she died, there had only been two people in the house, Linda and Paul. If she couldn't have done it, then the answer pointed directly to him. In 2007, more than a decade after Linda's death, Schul officially reopened the cold case. She began piecing everything back together. Linda's sudden illnesses, the mysterious IV bags, the insurance documents, the toxicology reports, and the contradictions in Paul's story. But she knew she needed more. Evidence was thin, and the case had grown cold for a reason. So she turned to psychology. In 2009, Schul contacted Paul Curry directly. She posed as a friendly investigator, just trying to wrap up some lingering details. Paul, still confident he had fooled everyone years earlier, agreed to talk. Over the phone, he opened up again and again, never realizing every conversation was being recorded. Schul never accused him. Instead, she listened, acting sympathetic, even a little naive. Bit by bit, Paul began to contradict himself, changing details about how he discovered Linda's body, stumbling over what medication she had taken, and slipping into small admissions that hinted at knowledge only the killer could have had. When Schul finally arranged to meet him in Salina, she kept her calm demeanor. They spoke for over an hour, Paul seemingly at ease, convinced he remained in control. Then, at the perfect moment, she gave the signal. Local officers moved in, and after more than 15 years of suspicion, Paul Curry was placed under arrest for the 1994 murder of his wife, Linda Curry. In court, prosecutors laid out the case. Expert testimony revealed that Linda had been deliberately injected with liquid nicotine while sedated. It was the very scenario her friends had warned her about, and now, nearly 2 decades later, the truth was laid bare. On September 11, 2014, Paul went on trial in California. By the end of that month, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, along with insurance fraud. He received the maximum sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Linda's sister, who had always suspected Paul, the verdict brought long-awaited justice. She had worked closely with investigators, keeping her sister's memory alive and pushing for answers when others had moved on. Linda Curry, remembered by those who loved her as compassionate, loyal, and full of warmth, had dreamed only of love and stability. But in trusting the wrong man, she unknowingly placed her life in grave danger. Paul Curry, the man who promised to care for her, instead betrayed her in the worst way possible. It would take 20 years for the truth to catch up with him. And while justice finally came, it could never erase the pain of losing Linda. A woman whose life was stolen by greed, and whose story continues to echo as a warning of the darkness that can hide behind a carefully constructed mask. Rest in peace, Linda. You will never be forgotten. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.